Welcome back to our channel, where we explore the scariest stories from around the web. Today, we've scoured Reddit to bring you the creepiest real stories we could find, and these stories will send shivers down your spine. Number 1. It was a stereotypical horror movie house, the kind you see in those spine-chilling flicks. My grandma lived in a small Midwest town, in a white and old-looking home that was perched on a farm. The front yard had a chipped wooden Mary Nativity that seemed to give off a sense of unease. To add to the horror, there was a cemetery that was just half a mile down the road. It was a spooky sight to see the gravestones in the dark of night. My aunt's room was the one in the corner on the top floor, and that was where I used to sleep whenever I visited my grandma's place. It was a cozy room, but it had a wooden rocking chair that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. When I was younger, I would often wake up in the middle of the night because I thought I heard it rocking. I would wake my grandma up and spend the rest of the night in her room, too scared to go back. Fast forward 10 years, and I was back at my grandma's place with my mom and aunt. We were sitting around the fire, and the conversation turned to how creepy the house was. My aunt began to recount how she had thought her room was haunted when she was younger. She said that one morning, she woke up to find the rocking chair about 2 feet closer to her bed. After that, every night at midnight, the chair would start rocking on its own, leaving her too terrified to sleep. As we sat there listening to her story, the clock struck 12, and the sound of the rocking chair echoed through the house. The air turned cold, and we all felt a presence in the room. My grandma's house was indeed haunted, and we were trapped inside, waiting for the horror to unfold. Number 2. It was a few years ago when I still had a flip phone. One day I received a random call from an unknown number asking for a girl named Sarah. I told them that they had the wrong number, and they hung up abruptly. However, the calls did not stop there. For the next few months, I would receive calls asking for Sarah once or twice a week, coming from different numbers and different sounding people. It was unsettling, especially when the calls would come in the middle of the night, at 3 in the morning. One day, I got a call, and like usual, I told them that I did not know Sarah. After they hung up, I decided to redial the number, but the answering machine said that the number did not exist. I went through my call history and tried calling some of the other numbers that had called me, but I got the same result. The number did not exist. I even tried Googling the numbers, but I couldn't find anything helpful. All I learned was that they were coming from North Dakota, Montana, basically everywhere in the Midwest. The situation took a turn for the worse when I decided to play along with the next caller and said that Sarah was with me. To my surprise, the person on the other end said, "No, she isn't," and hung up. From that moment on, things got weirder. I started receiving calls from unknown numbers, and whoever or whatever was on the other end would hang up the second I said hello. But once, I received a call where someone was listening on the other end without saying anything, and it left me with an uneasy feeling. As the calls continued to come in, I couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister was going on. Who was Sarah, and why were so many people calling me looking for her? Was it some sort of sick joke or something more sinister? I was about to find out, and it was not going to be pretty. Number 3. I checked into the Flamingo Hotel in Las Vegas, which had a notorious history of mob activity. Little did I know, my stay would turn into a nightmare. In the middle of the night, I woke up to a dark figure moving at the foot of my bed. The figure slowly crept up the gap between the twin beds, and I could see it was a man wearing a 60s sports blazer with blood all over his face. Trembling with fear, I quickly hit the light switch, and the full figure of the man came into view. I yelled for him to go away and started flinging my arms in his direction. Just like that, he disappeared into thin air. I was left in shock, but my friends who were sharing the other bed laughed at me, thinking it was just a bad dream. The next morning, my friend told me something that made my blood run cold. He had woken up in the middle of the night to find water dripping on his head, but there was no leak on the ceiling. We both started to wonder if we had shared a paranormal encounter in that hotel with a dark and terrifying presence. It made me wonder how many people had seen or experienced something similar during their stay at the Flamingo Hotel. The thought of it sent shivers down my spine, and I couldn't wait to leave that place. Number 4. I had a black cat named Casper, who we adopted after she ran away from her previous owner. She was a timid cat, but eventually warmed up to us and became a loving companion. One day, she suddenly lost the use of her back legs and passed away not long after. In the days following her death, my parents and I were grieving and feeling her absence deeply. But then strange things started happening. We each separately heard meowing that sounded exactly like Casper's, and when we went to investigate, we saw a cat that looked just like her. But every time we approached it, the cat would run away and disappear. We couldn't explain it. Was it just a similar-looking cat from the neighborhood or something more sinister? As the days went by, we never saw the cat again, but we couldn't shake the feeling that something strange was at play. Number 5. It was a regular night when I went to bed, but little did I know that I was about to experience something that would shake me to my core. I fell into a deep sleep and started dreaming, but suddenly my dream was interrupted by a voice that said, "The fire alarm is about to go off." I jolted awake, only to hear the deafening sound of the fire alarm blaring throughout the building. I couldn't believe what had just happened. I asked my roommates the next day if they had said anything before the alarm went off, but they all denied it and said they were sound asleep. It was strange, because none of us knew that the alarm was going to be tested that night. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, and I couldn't help but wonder if the voice I heard was warning me about something more sinister than just a fire alarm test. Number 6. It was the year 2005, and I was on tour with my band, traveling across the country in a 15-passenger van with a trailer. We were on our way from Columbus, Ohio to Erie, Pennsylvania, after our Ohio show was canceled due to a power outage. We wanted to get on the road early to reach Erie, where our friends were waiting to host us for the night. As we were all chatting inside the van, suddenly the driver and passenger shouted in unison, "What was that?" The hair on my arm stood up as I recalled the event. Sitting behind the driver with my back against the window, I didn't see anything, but I heard a whooshing noise as if something had flown right over us. My friend next to me looked petrified. We stopped the van on the side of the road, fearing we had hit something. We searched the area but found nothing. Both the driver and passenger said they saw a tall black figure leap at the van from the left lane shoulder, and my friend sitting next to me confirmed the same thing. The incident left everyone terrified. The following day, we checked the van in daylight and noticed streak marks across the roof. It was as if something had dragged its claws across the van. From that day on, we always made sure to avoid traveling on that particular road after dark. Number 7. When I was a child, I had an eerie encounter that still haunts me to this day. As I was walking home one day, an elderly man pushing a stroller suddenly approached me from behind and covered my eyes with his hand for a brief moment before continuing on his way. The incident was so strange and inexplicable that it has stuck with me ever since, leaving me to wonder what his true intentions were and why he singled me out for such a peculiar act. Number 8. As a child, I used to sleep soundly at night, but one fateful night, I awoke to the sight of a child kneeling beside my bed. I assumed it was my younger brother and asked him what he was doing. But as the child slowly turned to face me, I realized that it was not my brother at all. Startled, the child stood up and ran away, and I decided to follow him. I chased him down the stairs and out of the front door. The child led me to the end of the long driveway, and then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, he vanished into thin air. I was left alone, confused and terrified, and I ran back to my room. To this day, I still shudder at the memory of that mysterious child's visit. Number 9. When I was 14, I stayed up late on the computer while everyone else slept. The clock struck 2 a.m., and I wandered down the hallway to quench my thirst. I didn't bother turning on the lights because the night light in the hallway provided enough illumination. However, as I walked back to my bedroom, I felt like someone was watching me. When I turned around, a big white mist floated behind me, making my heart race. I quickly dashed back to the safety of my brightly lit room. Later, I learned that in the 80s, a man rented out the house where I lived. He was arrested for kidnapping, raping, and murdering several kids in the area, as well as his own wife, who had mysteriously disappeared. Although cadaver dogs searched the farm, nothing was found, and the man died in prison years later. When my family moved in, My mom found a pair of boys' underwear in the toilet tank, and we suspected that the missing wife's spirit still haunted the house. Even years after the incident, I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease, and I slept with a lamp on in the small room closest to where I saw the ghostly mist. Number 10. As the night grew darker, fear began to consume me. I had spent hours watching tingling paranormal videos, and now I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. Despite never having experienced any supernatural occurrences in my house, I couldn't help but feel on edge. Suddenly, at 3 a.m., I heard a loud snapping sound. My heart racing, I realized that the band on my boxer briefs had just broken, as if someone had pulled on them with tremendous force. Was I being haunted by an unseen presence, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was no longer alone in my own home. Number 11. When I was just 4 years old, something eerie happened in our small apartment. We had 2 rooms, and I was playing in our bedroom when my slipper got stuck under the bed. I couldn't reach it because the gap was only 2 inches wide. In a moment of impulsiveness, I started chanting, "Slipper, get out now," repeatedly. Suddenly, a sense of foreboding crept over me, and I became afraid, so I ran out of the room. After a few minutes, I cautiously returned to the bedroom, and to my horror, I saw that my slipper was now a foot away from where it had been stuck under the bed. I quickly grabbed it and fled the room, terrified. As a child, I tried to rationalize what had happened by assuming that a rat had pushed my slipper out after hearing my chanting. But even to this day, I can't shake off the feeling that something otherworldly was at play that night. Number 12. As I lay in the bathtub, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. To be safe, I locked the door so my dogs wouldn't interrupt my soak. The hot water and lavender oil were helping me relax, but something felt off. When I finally got out of the tub, I tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. It felt like something heavy was blocking it from the other side. I called out for my dogs, but there was no response. Panic set in as I realized I was trapped. After several minutes of pushing and shoving, the door finally creaked open, and I saw that a table had been moved in front of it. I knew I hadn't done it, but there was no one else in the house. The only explanation was that something sinister had moved the table to trap me inside. Number 13. As a child, my boyfriend had a strange habit of talking to a man he saw in the mirror. He would describe this man to his parents in great detail, from his appearance to his hobbies and how he passed away. It wasn't until later that they learned the horrifying truth. One of the former owners of their home had committed suicide in the house, and he matched the description of the man my boyfriend saw in the mirror. The realization sent chills down their spines, and they knew they had to leave. The family moved out of the house a month later, but the image of that man in the mirror stayed with my boyfriend for years to come, haunting him in his dreams and leaving him wondering what other secrets the old house held. Number 14. As I lay in bed visiting my dad last summer, I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. I tried to brush it off and go to sleep, but then I felt a cold hand tightly grip my ankle. I kicked and struggled, but the hand wouldn't let go. When I finally broke free and jumped out of bed, there was no one there. My dad rushed into the room, but he couldn't see anything unusual. He dismissed my claims, saying that it was just a nightmare or my imagination. However, I knew what I felt, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still lurking in the shadows, waiting for me to let my guard down. All right. Reddit is full of terrifying stories like this one. Who knows what other real stories are waiting to be discovered in the depths of the internet?